Ian, good morning.
Morning.
So this is the first, this is not the first, this is the earliest podcast that I've ever scheduled and done. So hopefully we live up to the expectation this time of morning. So this is episode 41. We just said I was here in Sheffield 6 months-ish ago, 7 months ago. I re-listened to the episode a bit yesterday and a bit this morning. So as we already started talking off air about your travels, and I think you mentioned that you were even going to Lebanon for teaching in the last episode. Did you go?
No, we didn't go at the end. I think obviously the local organising committee, I think maybe because of the situation over there, they were a bit hesitant. So see what comes back this year.
Because I wondered, it was definitely like the most exotic name you threw out there. But you did say Saudi Arabia that you went back with AJ.
Yeah, we went boxing in December, so that was a good trip, very successful trip, obviously for AJ and the team. So yeah, that was fantastic.
Have you taught in Saudi Arabia before?
No, I've not taught in Saudi Arabia, but where did I go this year? Which is eluding me at the moment. It'll come back to me. But I was in the region.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, because Saudi Arabia specifically, there's a lot of positive noise, put it that way, a lot of energy coming out of there in all different sports. I know boxing is also probably one of the first ones that we've been seeing coming out of Saudi Arabia, at least putting on events and things like that. I'm on the football side of the world. So as you know, like the last few months, all we see, especially because of Cristiano Ronaldo, but all we see now suddenly, like Saudi Arabian League is on TV and Saudi Arabian League is all over, highlights on social media. So it's definitely getting more popular. You graduated also. Since the last time I saw you, we were sitting here, you told me that you were going to defend your thesis or your so yeah, can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's since last time I met, which I think was June 23, now we're January 24, I go, wow, that was a roller coaster. By the way, I was teaching in Kuwait. That was the
Kuwait.
The cafe must be kicking in this morning. It's coming. The brain cells are coming. It was been fantastic. I had lots of positive work with GB boxing first of all, which is one of my main commitments. I had lots of travels with teaching, lots of online teaching. We did various work with professional boxers because, as we said last time, I operate as a catman, as a rap man, which quite interestingly at the moment, I'm even wearing the t-shirt. We've got an international tournament happening in Sheffield at the moment, part of the Olympic circuit. It's the first international tournament we're doing in Sheffield, so it's quite a big thing, the first tournament of the year. And my role actually, typically I work with the GB boxing, but I'm leaving my other physios to do that. What I am doing is I'm operating as a local organizing committee as the cutman. Okay. So I check all the reps of the other nations. I help the ones that don't know how to do it. I'm actually there as a neutral person this time on the ground. And the reason I mentioned this also is because it's the theme of the PhD, which I've just completed. 8 years of studies. People will raise an eyebrow. They go 8 years. I actually thought it was a lot, but I've been told by my tutors that actually is a good time because people do 10, 11, 12. So I was very surprised. But yes, my PhD in Wrist Biomechanics, looking at hand wrapping, which I was told was probably going to be very hard to complete within the timescales I wanted. But
why?
Why? Because I think with the time to defend the thesis, to get the revisions, to rewrite them, to send them back in and get them done, to graduate in November, by the time I had defended the thesis, they said the timescales are probably too narrow, so not to raise my hopes.
I see. And going into it, what was the question you were trying to answer? Or what was the thing you were trying to investigate when it comes to wrist biomechanics?
Well, one of the biggest questions was, okay, how do we measure the wrist when somebody boxes, because it has never been done before. So
Measuring the wrist, like to have some reference point to what it is where it is we want the wrist to move and how we want the wrist to move.
yeah, well, the first thing is you need a methodology. So it's like if you are gonna if you're gonna put up a shelf on the wall,
Yeah.
if you don't have a ruler or you don't have the right instrumentation, you can't even do it. So the first thing we had to come up with together with my supervisors is, what is the tool that we're going to use to measure? So we had to use these electromagnetic sensors, which you stick underneath the wraps, and we had to validate those. So that was, in itself, it was a very, very novel. So it's a new methodology.
So that also new technology as well.
Yeah, so it was, I'd say, relatively new. So it had been around for a few years, but
And is it something that's been used in boxing already to throw in underneath the wrap?
never. So the wrist has never been measured in boxing, which is, for me, it's incredible. When wraps have been around for millennia, thousands of years, and we're talking back in the Roman times, back in the Greek times, in the whole Colosseum.
Were they? So even back then they were wrapping?
They used to wrap their hands. They used to use things which they used to call sestertius, which used to be in leather. And sometimes you see it even now in the movies. Sometimes you still see it on their hands as they try and replicate that. But there was no reference. So the only reference you could use around the wrist is any other sports, which again, they're not a lot either, or general population. So once we found the methodology, the second thing was we had to understand is what happens when somebody strikes an equipment like the bag. So we did that, and then what we then did is, if I then start manipulating the bandaging, does it change it? And what we found is, by especially adding tape to your traditional wraps, your cotton wraps, it reduced the movement quite significantly. So that information is really important, because I want to make sure that when we are wrapping hands, that we're doing the right thing, both in training and competition. So it stemmed from, injuries, it stemmed from my clinical experience. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to add the research to the clinical experience, because if you're telling associations, if you're telling trainers, this is what you need to do, yes, I can say, look, I've got 15 years of experience in boxing, great, but the academics will say, but how do you know?
Yeah.
Because it's just your word. Well, when you do research, that's what you do. You try and either, you never know. You may find out what actually you think is right is wrong. Yeah. So if you have to be careful, because you could start a process being very biased. I try to be not biased. That's the way
you don't want to just confirm what you think you know already.
You might do something and find completely the opposite. You actually, by adding certain things, you actually get the opposite of what you're thinking, which literally could throw your thinking out completely. But no, it was a fantastic journey, 8 years. I think the last year was the most intense, because I set my foot down and I said, I am finishing this bad boy this year. And I managed, I don't even now, when I look back, I think like, I can't still believe I finished that.
So congratulations. So is it Dr. Ian
Doctor,
Gatt?
yes, you can call me Dr.
So I should have
Gatt now.
introduced you as Dr. Ian Gatt. No, fantastic. Congratulations. And was there anything that that maybe surprised you with your findings in the end, that you weren't expecting to find?
Well, there was, first of all, when somebody hits, you always think obviously the wrist could drop down. Mm-hmm. But what we didn't know is that the wrist could move one way or the other. And actually what we found is that when the wrist moves down, so moves towards the palm, it also moves towards the pinky.
Palm and pinky.
Yeah, so I mean, the technical terms for physios and people that know will say flexion and ulnar deviation. But it is surprising that it isn't at the same time, because flexion and ulnar deviation are combined movements in biomechanics that we call them a coupled movement. In fact, it's got another term. It's called the dart throwing motion. So you imagine somebody throwing a dart.
Yeah.
They're throwing the dart. It's bending towards the palm, but also it's moving away from you.
Yeah.
So but there were some studies that showed that, but there was never anything in boxing. So what that showed us also started to help us understand why certain injuries happen and why that direction of preference could cause things. So you're telling me, okay, so it made you understand the injuries, but practically, how does it help you with prevention, for example? Well, it's very interesting because when a boxer gives you your hand to wrap, a lot of boxers sometimes they don't keep the hand neutral, they move it. Because, for example, if they put it on the hand and in a certain position, they might move the hand like this. Now, somebody wrapping the hand might just wrap it in the way the boxer has put it. What I've now done, because of these studies, I will move the hand in a neutral position, and every time they'll move it, I'll move it back. So it's almost created a new awareness for me.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're doing this year also, we've launched a new course called Cuts and Wraps, which basically we're going to teach people about the cuts, which is the thing I do in the corners, but also how to wrap, because people have been asking me over the years, but now that I've finished the PhD, I thought, now we've got the evidence, now I can teach people. And the course is already flying, like people are really, really, really booking on it. And, I think it's fantastic.
And is it relevant to like professionals that are involved in boxing, fighting sports, or in any sport really?
Yeah, immensely. I think, to be fair, anybody that punches, I think, without too much inference, anybody that punches is going to follow the same suit as somebody that is like a boxer.
Yeah.
But my main focus is boxing, and yes, whether you are...
But the interest of people, was it all like boxing physios that are coming to you that are trying to...
No, it's not just physios. Therapists along the... it could be strength and conditioning coaches that like that. Your actual coaches, your boxing coaches, because a lot of the people that wrap their hands are the boxing coaches, the people in the corners sometimes. So I think what's nice for me is that, currently you might find odd courses here and there, but I don't think, there is a nice focus on how do you wrap the hands and why do you wrap the hands. I think that's the important thing, because a lot of people might show how they wrap the hands as a traditional way, but what sometimes people don't underline is the why. And because I've had now 15 years worth of physio experience looking at these injuries, and I've literally specialized around these areas, it's nice to say, well, this is the injury, this is how it happens, and so if you're trying to protect it or reduce the risk as best possible, this is why you do this when you use the bandage. I think it's trying to link those things together rather than, well, just bandage like this and people just do it like a parrot, like a technician, you know what I mean? I want people to think, if you're going to do something, why are you doing this? Why are you starting the tape from one side and finishing the other side?
Yeah, but it's also because in football, for example, and I've seen this in many sports, like in volleyball and basketball, where everyone gets their ankle wrapped, and also it's like you see the people applying the tape and the wraps. They're doing it the exact same for every single person.
Yeah.
Regardless of the shape of their ankle or what injury they might have or what discomforts they might have. So am I thinking about that correctly? Like, can we almost compare?
Yeah, you can compare in a way. I think the anatomy between people, there's some variances, but it's not going to change massively. Yeah. You're not going to have a foot instead of a hand, for example. Yeah. But you are going to have certain differences. Yeah. So, for example, certain boxers, it's very important, first of all, to look at the shape of the hand, particularly the knuckles, because the knuckles could be slightly different between people. But also some people might be more prone to the knuckle injuries. So you definitely might want to focus a bit more there. Some people may be more prone to the back of the hand, so you might want to focus there. But for me, it's important if you're wrapping that you have a base, good approach, generic, and for some people you might add certain differences. Some people want it a bit looser, some people want it a bit tighter, some people want it less bulky on there. And
but then those things also affect the movement of the hand?
Yeah, well, they won't affect the movement per se, but because everybody boxes differently and has different styles and different ways of doing things, you need to make sure that it's like a dance, that you're working with the person in front of you. So it's a bit like, you mentioned an ankle. You could wrap many ankles, you could tape many ankles, but everybody will have different nuances. If you do the same exact technique for 10 people, you might do well with 5 of them. Yeah. The other 5 go, well, it's too tight or too loose. You could do well with 9. You could do well just with 1. So I think like anything else, when you start doing things, even though you've been doing, you could teach a basic technique. And that's what sometimes people who teach techniques, they show videos, they'll show many things. But I think it's important that you have that part of your brain that can adapt depending on the person in front of you. So when I'm rapping, first of all, I always make sure that I'm looking at the person, I'm speaking to the person, I get that feedback, and even with the tape. But one of the biggest differences, I think, between rapping other parts of the body and a hand is very intricate. And it probably takes you a good 10, 15 minutes to wrap just the one hand. So, you're spending 20, 30 minutes wrapping two hands.
Oh, I didn't realize it takes that long.
Yeah, so
Wow.
it's quite a bit, and obviously you've got different materials. Yes, of course, you've got different materials for other places, but I can wrap a shoulder, an elbow, and many of these things before somebody goes into training in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And sometimes, in fact, you see people doing like speed taping on YouTube or videos about ankles and other things, wrapping an ankle in 30 seconds. There's no way you're going to wrap a hand in 30 seconds. In fact, if you do that, I'll say it's a shit job.
Did you? So did it become a goal of yours 8 years ago to do this PhD, to complete it, or has it always been something you wanted to tackle?
It's a funny thing. I mean, when you start a PhD, you don't realize what it is, because you set out with many ideas. First of all, I think the way tutors put it to you, with all the ideas you have in your head, you could do about 20 PhDs. So what I think they managed to do, which is great, and that's why it's important when you've gone through the process. I think you're in a very good position to help anybody who's thinking about a PhD.
Yeah.
A lot of people go, what's the advice you'd give? And you go, don't do it. But I wouldn't say that. I think if you're passionate about a topic and you've already done certain studies and you want to venture into that, of course, do it. But it's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot out of your life. I think 2023, any free weekend I had was on the PhD. I had maybe 1 or 2 holidays which I managed to book to keep myself sane a bit. But between the other commitments I had, every little second I had was devoted to the PhD. You couldn't just go, oh, it's a beautiful day outside, I'm going to go for a walk. No, morning till evening, just writing. I think that's what you need to think about yourself. You have that commitment. But when I set out, obviously my goal was to better understand the risks. It wasn't to, I want to confirm this, or I just want to understand a bit more about it and maybe be able to do a little dent in the research community and have an impact. And I feel that hopefully now, as I said, with further teaching around the hand wrapping, with helping all the physios that work with me, I teach them how to hand wrap, and they do that and everything, that I'm doing it from a position not just of experience, but also of research. And I think that really helps.
Fantastic. When you got started early on as a physio, did you have a mentor in the industry?
It's interesting because I think it's always important that when you go through your years, you look back and you look at people that you can either call them mentors or have influenced you. I started my journey as an undergraduate in Malta. And I think...
Did you sign up to become a physiotherapist?
Yeah. So I did 4 years. It's a bachelor course, an honors course for 4 years. And back in those days, we had, I'd say, four main tutors, really, one of them being the principal, and all of them had a different style.
Yeah.
And I think that the first thing that struck me is that I think already I had this element of it'd be nice to be in that position where you've got knowledge to give. So I think from even when I was an undergraduate, I always had that affinity. It'd be nice to be somebody that you can provide knowledge, experience. So I think the way I look up to it is I'd like to be in that position, learn more things. And I think one of the things I always wanted to do is work in sports. And in my country, Malta, sports is quite small. So, I wanted to venture. And I went to Greece because that's where the next Olympics was going to be in 2004.
And the first one ever, no?
The first one for me.
No, the first ever Olympics.
Yeah. The first. Well, you go back all the years. Yeah, definitely. So 2004 there was going to be Olympics. So I went there, and actually, there's something between fate and between working hard and trying hard. But the person that I worked with for the first 5 years, he was my first mentor. He was somebody very recognized. He used to teach in Greece. He was involved with, at the time, he was working with the national team of gymnastics in Greece, a chap called Yorgos Rogdakis. Very tough guy, very, stern guy, I'd say. But I think when you build that respect with somebody like that, that goes a long way. So he was my first tutor. And I think, I'll never forget that, because he probably gave me a certain foundation. And then as I went along, there were probably a few different people, whether they were people that came from abroad to teach and you see sort of their mannerism, whether it's somebody you're working with. And so I think over the years, there's always been people which I've looked up to and said, that way, the way you're approaching things is really nice. And I think it's that difference between, especially when you talk about physiotherapy, is the non-technical and the technical parts. The technical parts could be the hard, the hardcore things. So, it could be the rehab stuff, the exercises, the manual therapy, whatever it is. But then for me, what really attracted me even more was the non-technical parts. The mannerism, how you speak, how you interact with people. And I think it's the reason why I moved into a higher role, because what I do now with GB Boxing is I'm their head of performance services, where I manage 16 practitioners, the doctors, the physios, the nutritionists. And for me, moving into that area of leadership, and I think that's the important thing. I don't see myself as an educator. I don't see myself as a physio or a tutor. Hopefully, what people see in me is a leader. Somebody that can give guidance, facilitate. Sometimes people use the word coaching, but somebody that people can look up to, I do hope, and can provide advice and help. And that's why I try my hardest whenever people message me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, whether it is a student, whether it is somebody who's only been 5 years postgraduate, or whether somebody's 30 years, I give them the same time. What was it? This week, somebody who I know said there's this physio from gymnastic from Scotland that needs some advice. Can you help them? I said, yeah, tell them to email me. They emailed me and I gave them some information. They were really thankful. And that's what I try and do. Even with the limited time I have, I always try and give time, because for me, it's important. It's nice to know that if I was on the other side of the fence, there'd be somebody willing to help out.
Yeah, that's how your leadership role pretty much transcends GB boxing, and you can help a gymnastics coach in Scotland and also influence. How I've been, as of the last few months, I would say, almost trying to learn my wrists better. Mainly from, I think, the perspective of more weight bearing exercises on my wrists, just to kind of see how they react and what they're capable of, and maybe how much I can test their range of motion, for at least for my wrists. And I usually go a bit too far. And it's something hurts, but I'm always positively surprised by how quickly my wrists recover. And I'm also always positively surprised by how I'm always increasing the range of motion of the wrist, and it's always becoming more comfortable. I don't know to use the right term, but even pushing it forward to even a push-up position. Bring your shoulders as forward as possible, which without practice, almost felt impossible. My wrist would never be able to, to accomplish such a thing. But it's amazing how quickly they adapt.
Yeah, I mean, that's the body. It's not just the wrist. I think sometimes people think of the wrist as something fragile, flimsy.
But maybe that's why, because we never really weight bear with the wrists.
Well, we do weight bear. That's how we start as babies.
Right.
And,
tell me more.
And if we go back, we used to walk on all fours, really. We were quadrupeds before we became bipedal, before we stood up and became erect. So, our hands and wrists are literally, they mimic what the foot and ankle is, but we're comfortable to jump on the feet and everything, because that's obviously how we keep building in nature. But if you think about gymnasts, if you think about divers, if you think about even circus performers, the things they can do on their wrists is amazing. I mean, you see, going back to a gymnast, somebody who works on the floor, equipment, and they're just literally just jumping from leg to wrist to hand to leg and wrist. And you ask, how can they do it? Well, they've adapted over time. And that's where it's very important. If you're somebody who's, in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or even beyond, or even younger, and you've not done something, it's not about not doing something, but it's about being sensible. You don't start with high intensity. You don't start with high volume. Yeah. You don't start with high frequency, meaning you're doing a lot in the week. Yeah.
But also all gradual.
But it's the same like running. If you've not run for the last 3-5 months, or you've never run, you don't go and do a marathon. Yeah. So you start gradually, you build up, you get a few aches, you back off a bit, you listen to your body. And obviously, you be careful, you don't do too much, so you don't get a sudden injury. You've done so much, you can't tolerate it. So I think with any activity, it's very important. And this is really important because I think on social media these days, not just hands and wrists, I think for all parts of the body, there's a lot of fear mongering. There's a lot of people out there with lots of followers that say, don't do this exercise. Don't do it like this. Don't do it like this. And it gets you in a position where there's so much fear mongering, you might as well not go to the gym because you almost need instructions for dummies on how to lift weights these days. What I say to people is, and I know there's a lot of good colleagues that echo what I say.
Yeah.
It's not about, there isn't a wrong exercise. There could be the wrong exercise at the time, if you have got an injury, or there could be the dosage is wrong. If you never been to concerts, you don't go a concert first time, heavy rock, for example, because you're going to come out with your ears pounding.
Yeah, Taylor Swift,
she'll be all right, yeah. Good melodies there, good ups and downs. But that's what I mean. I think, people shouldn't be afraid to do anything. Start gentle, ease into it. These days there are also fantastic apps, for example, like how to start running. Well, don't start by doing a 30-minute prod if you've never done running and then your legs are aching and everything. Maybe you develop shin splints. Sometimes you start and stop. Run for a minute, walk for 3 minutes. There's so many different variants. Yeah. And there isn't a perfect recipe. If anybody says out there, this is a perfect exercise or this is a perfect way of doing this, I call bullshit. Yeah. Because the perfect recipe is the one that works for you. So you need to adapt it to work for you. It goes with everything. It goes with food. It goes with sleep positions. These days, people say there are wrong sleep positions. It's like, oh, come on now. But everybody does that to show somehow that they are gurus. And trust me, they have zero evidence. They have zero evidence. Yeah. And probably that's one of the reasons why I did a PhD, is to have at least an ounce of evidence on what I say.
Yeah, which I can only imagine is helpful, especially when you're out there teaching and you're out there preaching certain things. So you have at least a receipt that you can also, it's not, I know you graduated, but right, the study of the wrist for you is not finished. You'll keep developing and learning and changing with it. The wrist itself, can it dislocate?
Oh yeah, it's a very complex, multi-articular joint. The wrist is not one joint.
Yeah,
it's breaking it down simply, it's two joints, which sometimes blows people's mind because people think it's the wrist one joint. That's how they've learned at uni. Hopefully, even with the years of teaching I've done, it's echoed out. But even those joints, you can break them even into further down. Yeah. If you think about the bones that make up the hand and the wrist together, you've got 29 bones just in this region here. So it's like, if you think about your spine, which is massive, that's 33 bones. So it's not far off, and actually in a very small space. So you can dislocate, you can subluxate, which is a bit lesser than dislocate, you can tear ligaments, tendon avulsions, fractures, you name it.
But from punching though, is that something you guys see?
Oh, yeah,
quite
you
a
can,
lot
of
of
course.
dislocation.
Yeah.
And how long does it take, for a professional athlete, or not professional, but a top athlete that you work with, to come back from such an injury?
Depends. I mean, one of the worst injuries in a boxer is they could either be the knuckles, where they can tear ligaments over there, and they can
Ligaments in the knuckles.
Yes, on the knuckles, you've got two ligaments. That's actually quite funny. You've got two ligaments that come together. They call them sagittal bands, but together they call them the extensor hoodie. So it's like the hoodie. And what they do is actually to keep your tendons.
So is that what we feel right above the knuckles?
So what you feel there is you actually feel the tendon. And the tendon, and quite interestingly, when you're flexing, these ligaments become tight to keep the tendon from moving. So if you tear one of them, you lose an anchor basically, and it will move. And so when people punch, what I find very interesting is your tendon acts as a shock absorber. If the tendon moves now, you're hitting the raw joint. So it could make it really painful. So that could be a bad injury. And then even here at the back of the hand, like these bones, they don't move, or they move very little.
Yeah.
So the index finger and the middle finger. But if you hit it at a bad position, like this, it flexes, literally you could tear the ligament. Now, if it's quite bad, those two injuries, and you need an operation, you could be looking up to 6 months. So half a year out of your career is gone recovering from an injury. That's quite a lot. When I think about it we're talking about last time we did a podcast till now.
Yeah.
Imagine that was your injury recovery time.
No,
6 months, 6 months plus sometimes.
That's
I
right.
mean, on GB, they got super care. If you're out in the wilderness, to put it this way, you don't have that same level of support. So sometimes it could even take longer.
Yeah, absolutely.
We did some studies with the surgeon that I've been working with the surgeon, fantastic in the north, Mike Hayton. He's done many of these operations. And we actually published 2 papers together and with other colleagues on these 2 injuries. On average, it will take somebody about 8 months to recover. So that's a big chunk of time. So you can think it's not just the recovery per se, it's a psychological recovery too.
Yeah.
Even though I have done so many of these operations as a physiotherapist, to call it so, I can only imagine how hard it can be for somebody on the other side, the athlete, to go through all this process.
Yeah, and I mean, you've seen it, right?
I've seen it. I've lived it so many years.
Yeah.
So I always need to make sure that I'm not just working with the psychologists and the rest of the team, but even I myself have what you call emotional intelligence. So you're there supporting them and you understand them, because you're going to have some hard days also.
Yeah.
And so you just need to make sure if you do your job really good, you're explaining everything, you're creating a plan, you're creating the time skills, you're telling them when they're going to return back to boxing, and you do it well, then it's all good. It's when people don't do it well, or people try and jump too many steps because they don't know the in-between.
Yeah.
So for example, if somebody goes from, starting to tippy-tap on a bag and then tomorrow they start sparring, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
It's like saying, well, I went on a walk on a treadmill for 6 kilometers per hour and the following day I sprinted at 20. Oh, I pulled my hamstring. Well, of course you pulled your hamstring. You went from that to that and you've not been trained in between. So people need the guidance. One of the things I've realized is that out there isn't that knowledge. So, one of the things I'm trying to do, especially over these next couple of years, is keep bringing that knowledge to front so that people have a reference point where to go. In the meantime, people contact me.
Because the reference point is important for people.
Yes.
Some framework to work with, also for the athlete to have some hope, because I'm like, if you, after a wrist surgery, I'm assuming it's similar to an ankle or knee surgery, it must seem like I'm never going to punch again. It's impossible. And you, as a physio, or anyone really, like you, if you're walking that athlete through the recovery process, to some degree, you might be the most important person in their life for those few months. So you are creating something, again, that transcends boxing. It's a partnership, it's a relationship, and the physio's mood that morning, could affect the rehab of that athlete that day. I went through it took me like 10 months to come back from a knee surgery. ACL, MCL, the whole caboodle. And the person that was in charge of my rehab, I can't say that he was, good at his job. He was probably a beginner himself,
Yeah.
trying his best. But I can't say he was good looking back. Probably making wrong decisions technically along the way. But I have nothing bad to say about him. As he was there for me. He was trying his best. He was there because it is, and no one understands, right? No one can kind of connect with you. So you must see that all the time.
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing. So I, for example, very close to me, I've got 3 full-time physios that work in boxing. And every day they'll ask me questions, they send me WhatsApp, they want that sounding board. But for me, one of the biggest successes is going beyond the shores of boxing, is having people from multiple sports that have contacted me over social media or other modalities, or seen me privately, because I do private consultations. A physio from football with a goalkeeper will come all the way from somewhere in the UK, or I've even done online consultations in different parts of the world. But my point is that if you're working with somebody, it's important that you feel confident in what you're doing. If you're not confident, you need to go out and look for that information. Now,
because the athlete will feel it too.
Well, yes, because at the end of the day, they're looking at you as the expert. You are the expert. So they want to make sure that the information you're giving them is the best information available. So what is important in that context is making sure that if you don't know the information, you seek it out. Now, whether it is through research papers and you can assimilate that, great, or colleagues in the vicinity, or you're doing courses, or you're asking people. But however it is, you need to make sure that you don't just go, well, I know it. Because I do the same. I'm all the time making sure that I don't just go, well, people think I'm an expert, so I'm going to stop now. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm all the time looking at things. And one of the best things that I do, in my opinion, and a lot of colleagues do it at this level, is read articles and then share this information to the wider public with a little synopsis. So on Twitter, on Instagram. And I like doing that because it keeps me fresh. So I'm reading something and I'm sending it out, and it's keeping me fresh. And because you're always trying to send the latest articles, 2023, 2024, rather than 1960, that'd be very strange if I went, oh, this is what we do, and I 1960 paper. People will look, wait a bit, what just happened there? That's quite an old article, really, we've just put out there. But that's what I mean. It's important that you keep yourself fresh. And what I think a lot of young practitioners don't do well at times, maybe it's because of their employer or themselves, is they are literally in the trenches, just working away, just doing the cases, and not putting aside the time to reflect, to read things, to think about things.
And you always have to create the time, because
have
they're
to.
all going to be busy, right?
You have
Especially
to.
if you're a beginner in your journey, you're going to be super busy.
It's never going to change.
Yeah.
There's this illusion of time.
Yeah.
For me, it's like these films, The Matrix and other types of films. Time is an illusion. You can never say, I don't have time. You are the one that has to create it. And sometimes things have to shift. So, if you feel you really don't have time, well, you need to look at, Monday till Sunday and look where the time is available. And if it's not available this week, then look at next week and look at the next month. But you have to be your own master of time, because nobody can change that for you.
Do you work out?
Yes, I do.
What's your workout regimen?
So
you carve out the time to work out?
Yes, I do. I'm going to be honest. I probably struggled in the last 6 months of 23 because the PhD literally absorbed that time. And I think sometimes you have to be realistic. But rather than it put me down in thinking I can't work out, I thought, this is the period. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to reset from January. And that's what I did. I came into January. I waited for the first couple of weeks to go because if you start from the first week, sometimes it's too keen, and you need a little break. I mean, I'm not going as a soldier, as a recruit or something like that. It's my own body. It can wait a few weeks. But yeah, what I like to do is either cardio, so running, for example, outdoors particularly, even with this very cold weather, or doing weights. And there's lots of great evidence anyway that doing resistance training or cardio is good for your body. So there's never a wrong time to start. Just go for it. But one thing I know for sure, it is up here. It's mentally.
Yeah.
Once you go mentally, then you can do it. And one of the things I make sure is, rather than try and do mega sessions, just go for 40 minutes, 30 minutes. What can I do within the time I have available? And so I do carve out the time, and I like to do it in the morning, early morning. Start training maybe 7:30, so it's out of the way. It's nice also because by the time I finish, you're getting the sunrise, so it's quite nice really. And it means that at that time nobody's calling you, nobody's sending you emails. Music in my ears. That's my, reset time from the day before and preparing me for the day ahead. So it's, works for me.
I guess in most team sports, at least, it's very separated, the male versus female. So, you imagine Manchester United even, yes, they're under the same roof, but completely separated.
Yes.
From the performance, from the support, psychological support, and it's all completely separate, technical and non-technical. But for you, it's you oversee females and males boxers as well. But so how is that? Is that a challenge where you feel like you do have to adapt certain things when approaching a female versus when approaching a male, even when it comes to things like surgeries, injuries, rehab, expectations, that type of thing?
Yes and no. I'd say I'll start with the no first. No is because we see them as an athlete rather than a male and a female.
Yeah.
The first thing is seeing them as an athlete, seeing them as what they are meant to be there to perform. And
as a nuanced athlete that's there like regardless if male or female have their own differences that need to be tended to.
No, but then yes, that's the yes part. You need to break it down. We know that the female brain thinks different than the male brain, and so you need to adapt. But when I say that, you'll find that some males sometimes tend to react and be very similar to how the females are. Some females might be a bit more to the male, so you're always going to find those outliers. But when I say the female brain is different, because I don't want people to get the wrong hand, they're more inquisitive, they're more curious.
Better.
And so if you are, for example, giving them information around an injury, first of all, you need to make sure that the information you're giving is information that they really, really want. So sometimes they'll be asking questions, and if you're not really accustomed to working with that male or you only work with males and suddenly start working with females, it seems like they're challenging you. They're asking questions and you feel, wait a bit, are they questioning my knowledge, my intelligence? And what I tell people is, look, get down from your pedestal. You need to learn how to work differently between the male and the female. But one of the things I love is when you walk in the boxing gym, is the males and the females, they're all there or having a laugh. You get the sparring, you get the males watching the females and the females watching the males. I mean, these days also, which is amazing, in the pro circuit, you've got mixed competitions. So you've got like Liverpool, for example, on Saturday, Natasha Jones is heading she's heading the competition. And when you go in the undercards, you got some female bouts and you've got some male bouts. One of the things I love also is in the amateur circuit, male competitions and female competitions used to be separate. So even for my physio team, you'd have to travel to a male and then to a female, completely separate. Now it's amazing to see it's mixed. I mentioned it earlier. At the moment, we're working in Sheffield. We've got this GP Open, part of the World Federation. So it's an international tournament happening in Sheffield. Today is day 3. And what I really have enjoyed is that in the changing rooms, you've got the males and the females. You don't have females and males separate. Males and females female coaches, male coaches, everybody working with each other. And when I've been asked to wrap hands for the different nations, particularly those that don't know, I've wrapped female hands, I've wrapped male hands. I think that for me is an amazing way of showcasing sport.
Yeah. And so even in that, like when you teach even how to, the wrapping and the cuts, is that different the way you teach? Because the bodies are different.
They are and they aren't. What do I mean is that a lot of times, not all, but the female hands are smaller.
Yeah.
When you look at the weight categories, for example, with the man, you've got like things, the big guys.
I know. Last time you said there's the heavyweight class and everything else.
Yes, and everything goes. Yeah, I mean, that's reality how it is, really.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes is when you're rapping is remembering the person in front of you. And so I think it's important to remember that. And that's where I go back to the no part where I said it's an athlete, because the person in front of you, rather than thinking it's a male and a female, I just think, wait a bit, male and females, what are the classic injuries that you expect more in one versus the other? Example. And then the other thing is a person in front of you, what's their character? Are they a chatty character, which could be a male or a female? Are there somebody who's got their headphones in there and just want to be in the zone? So rather than male and female in that situation is just understanding what they want to do. The main difference, though, if we take Olympic boxing, for example, is that goes beyond the wraps, is the size of the gloves. So all females usually use a 10-ounce glove. The males, there's a cutoff where then it becomes 12 ounce, which is 71 kilogram and over. So it's important to know that.
Yep.
And the second thing is the head guards. The females wear head guards, the man don't. So there's a rule element which is important to know. Otherwise, which is really good, and I enjoy that, the rules on wrapping is the same. Because I know initially it was the man with the pro style and the woman no, and I was like, nah. Both of them can have.
So for you can approach them the same.
I'm going to approach them the same.
Yeah, amazing.
But it's always individual. The individual is the person rather than the male and the female.
And the actual, you said like classic injuries that a female might face versus a male boxer might face. Are there differences?
Yes. I mean, male boxers, we tend to see more hand injuries typically than the females. But for example, knuckles, I think they share the similarity. When it comes to the back of the hand, these joints where the long bones meet the smaller ones, what we call the carpometacarpal joints, we see them more with the males than with the female counterparts. So whether it's the way they hit, the force they hit, I don't know whether the head guards have any influence, but that's important for us to know. Equally also with cuts, because the females have head guards, we see less cuts in the face. And then we see with the males, which we see much bigger cuts. So I think that's why, even when thinking about the course in April, which I'm teaching, cuts and wraps, it's important for me that differentiation. If you're working in professional boxing, where actually the females don't have head guards, but then they do 2 rounds rather than 3 rounds. So they have less exposure. So it's still outlining those differences, what the research says, and also what you could find in practice.
Yeah. This tournament, is it, so you said it's connected to the Olympic trials?
It's not a qualifier because the qualifier is in February in Italy, but it is a preparation.
Yeah.
And for us, for GB, what is really important, it showcases the boxers and gives them an opportunity to showcase the performance and be selected. Because, at the end of this tournament, you could have some boxers who performed really well and become eligible for selection. There could be a dark horse that comes through. That maybe we're thinking, we're not sure about this boxer, male or female, and suddenly they perform out of this world and they put themselves in an eligibility to be selected. Because that's the thing, is it? You want to first be selected to go to the tournament, the qualifier, and then you want to go there and hopefully qualify. Because if this doesn't happen this time, there's still another chance. They've got another qualifier in May, should be in Thailand, but that would be the last chance. But literally, this tournament is really important for some nations because it gets them ready for it.
Now, do you have a mentor? You mentioned there's a couple of people that had influence of you in the beginning, but is there someone now that you're that you look at that helps you out, that you can email?
I don't have a mentor per se. I think I have various colleagues who have expertise in different areas, and it's nice when you are at a certain level that you can still reach out to other people.
They'll come to you for the wrist. You'll go to them for something else.
Yes, exactly. There is that, and also, because within my area of boxing, I'm a leader. I'm a head of performance science, as I said. So, sometimes traditionally used to be called the head of sports science and medicine. I might go to somebody who's a colleague in another sport and share ideas about a difficult case, which might not have to do anything with an injury. It's just a difficult situation, and just share ideas. It could be somebody about one of my support staff. It could be something around a coach situation, whatever. The other thing which I have, which I wouldn't call it a mentor, is a tutor. Actually, people always know I'm crazy, but the week I finished my PhD, the following week I started a leadership course. So I know, I'm one of those people.
Good.
So I actually have a tutor.
Yeah.
As part of this leadership course, which is great. I mean, it's, you have to do the modules and everything. But I think it's, although it's very self-directed, self-learned, the tutor is there to help you, guide you through the course. So in its own way, they are indirectly helping me too, because it's allowing me to understand certain constructs, certain concepts, and also allows me to practice things and learn on the job. Because it's classed as an apprenticeship. So I'm learning on the job, which is quite interesting. Having been there 6 years, it's always nice that you can keep on learning.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell people, people say, will you ever leave boxing? I say, well, the day I stop learning, maybe.
I also believe I wanted to ask you about, you were with the Formula One driver.
Oh, yes.
So was that specific to a wrist injury?
Yes. I mean, I won't mention names, although it's obviously everybody knows it's on social media. But yeah, he was very unfortunate. He had a mountain bike accident actually 2 weeks before the season started in Formula One in the last season. Broke both wrists, one of them needing surgery. And within 2 weeks, we got him behind the wheel. We got him earlier because the actual competition started 2 weeks later, the first Grand Prix. But we got him behind the wheel, and he did well for the first part of the season. In fact, I say, it's a shame really, because when he had the wrist problem, the car and him, the performance, they were doing much better than in the second part of the season. So maybe the injury was a really good part. But yes, what I found really fantastic was that his team, the team that worked with him, reached out to me.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic that I could help and assist. But one of the fantastic things I found was that the team that worked with him, they had no ego. They come to you and they say, look, we don't have a clue how to manage this in the best way possible. We want to manage it in the best way possible. Please help us. And I, in my own way also, I need to remember to always stay humble, because what you don't want to do is go in there and almost push the team aside to try and prove that you're better.
Yeah.
I think it's very important, because I see it a lot of times. People's egos come into the ways. So you need to always come in as somebody who's, yes, I might be very experienced around the hands and wrist, and I love Formula One, by the way. I follow all the races where possible, so I am a fan in itself. But I have to go in there thinking, I don't know anything about Formula One. These guys are the experts on Formula One. So when you put their brains and my brains together, and you put the athlete's needs in front, it's a fantastic recipe. The only thing that could go wrong is that we don't progress how much we want to. But the best thing is that cohesion. And I always say this, it's not just about the end result. It's not just where you want to get to at the end. Remember the journey. If the journey was a horrible journey to get there, people's egos coming into play, and I'm better than you and all that. Even if the athlete gets better, it leaves you a sour taste. So whenever you're working in sports and non-sports, just work with the people around you. There's no need for all this aggro. That's what I say. So one of the things I always make sure in my work of place is that I've got an open door policy, first of all, but I reduce the aggro. Whenever there's this noise, especially now we're in an Olympic year, very important. If there is noise, I try and make sure I'm the sounding board and try and reduce that noise because it's not necessary.
And you feel it being the tension turn up on Olympic year?
Yeah,
in the facility?
yeah, the tension is always going to be bigger.
Yeah.
You know, somebody's out because of an injury. You know, you want all the athletes not to be injured.
Yeah.
You want everybody to be happy and everything. But there's always going to be tension. People are going to be tired. Lots of things can happen. So you always have to be careful that you think about what if the person that I was having a go at was me. You know, do you ever have a go at yourself in the mirror?
Too many times.
You know, but when you do it, you can take it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're giving it at yourself same level. And sometimes you can even be harsh at it.
Yeah.
But other people can't take it the same way. And you don't know what's going on in that particular situation. So it's always important to, I always say, understand the context.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes somebody will come to me and say, oh, this happened. It's very easy for me to go, I'm going to make up my mind now about the situation. What I try and do is I try and explore it. I try and find out a bit more, a bit of Sherlock Holmes. And I found myself in situations where the majority of people have a negative aptitude about somebody, for example, and they've already made a decision. You know, they've thrown the stones. They've put them up in front of the firing squad.
Yeah.
And I'm the one that then are defending this person, having to change it around. I'm not trying to make myself like a hero, by the way. But I've learned...
You're all on the same team.
We're on the same team. But having been on that side also, where you're the person who, you know, you feel like, why are people having a go at me? They don't understand the context. It's important that, you know, I get people to understand those contexts because we're all human after all.
Yeah.
But naturally, I don't know why, there are some people on this planet that easily will go for the negative. Easily will go, yeah, you're fired type thing, rather than, wait a bit, did you even understand the context? Do you understand the person? You know what's going on? You know what I mean? We don't take the time. Like, the world has become so rushed, you know, Instagram, everything, WhatsApp, everything is so quick that we even make big decisions quickly. I'm thinking, nah, you need to take a step back and ease down.
I know I heard, but before I asked you my last question, I heard something yesterday which I really liked and I had to listen to it a few times. It was one sentence. It was something along the lines of, we don't have much time on Earth, so we need to slow down.
Yes.
Which is kind of like a counterintuitive sentence. But yeah, we don't have much time, so slow down. So my last question to you is something I've started asking every single guest as the last question, is if there's something out there that, 15 years ago you were certain about, absolute about, that today you're like, oh my God, I completely changed my mind on. Almost like, and why we've implemented this is A, to maybe, pull out something from your personal story, and B, to teach, really to teach, because, as you said, I think the last episode, and you're not the only one to say this, but the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. So this will help maybe younger individual, you 15 years ago, 20 years ago, learn. So is there something?
There are many things, but I think one of, if I take therapists, and I'm not just physiotherapists, all therapists, I think with a lot of the modalities we use, the hands-on techniques like manual therapy or acupuncture or whatever it is, I think, the way we were taught it back then is, you do this, these are the effects. Well, these days, it's not that. If I'm mobilizing a joint, we used to think mechanically, I'm doing this and this is what happens. It's almost like A plus B equals C. It's not like that. Why people improve, it's still a paradox. And I think what we need to do is embrace that and simplify things. And I'd say also not keep talking lots of bullshit, because there's so much evidence these days that tells us that this is not exactly what's happening and this is not exactly what's happening. But then there are all these so-called therapists that put on, that have lots of followers, which makes it even worse, which say, oh, you do this and this happens. And you look at them thinking like, what the hell? Are we still living in the 1980s? So what I tell everybody is not that the evidence doesn't tell us these things don't work, but they might not work for certain conditions, particularly chronic conditions. It's good to do other things instead. it's that when you're doing things, take a step back and think, when I'm doing something, is it really because of the way I think, or there are other reasons? And embrace uncertainty. If you're unsure about something, we don't need to know everything to help somebody. You don't need to be even, as I said, people class me as an expert in hands and wrists, elbows, shoulders. I don't know everything about those things. But there's a difference between having expertise and experience. Experience is time on the clock. Expertise is always reaching out and avidly learning new things. If somebody comes to you and asks you something and you tell them, I'm not sure about that, but actually I'll look it up. That implies more knowledge, more confidence than fuffing it up, trying to invent something to make it look good. Or even worse, confidently saying bullshit. So what I'd say to young people and to older practitioners is be careful what you say. Be careful what you say and be confident with what you know, but be confident also with what you don't know. And always keep learning. So, the younger me used to be somebody to think everything has to fit in a box and that, oh yeah, the lecturer told me this. I tell people when I teach my courses, challenging me. Please do challenge me. But I always remind them that I work in boxing. So I know how to parry and come back.
Dr. Ian Gatt, thank you very much. Good having you on again. And hopefully we can do a third sometime in the future. Enjoy the weekend with the World Boxing. What is it? The World Boxing.
Yeah, so World Boxing
GB
Federation
Open.
is the new federation that is starting to look out after the Olympic movement, which is fantastic. But it'll be the GB Open in Sheffield. Also, for people who want to, learn more about the education we try and provide, you always find it under the hashtags Learning Together, all about the upper limb. And now I've also added all about boxing injuries because we do obviously the face and the cuts and the wraps, obviously.
And you're Ian Gatt, the boxing physio.
Yeah, you find me Ian Gattman, the boxing physio. You find me on Twitter. Also, you'll find me on LinkedIn. But on all my social media, there's a link. And on that link, you'll find all courses and resources because, there's free stuff too. It's not just about the courses where people can find any information that we're trying to provide.
And I follow you on social media and I do see the stuff that you post, like you mentioned, the new studies, you trying to stay up to date, and it's always good stuff. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day and weekend ahead.
Thank you. Likewise.